and welcome to the Cuyamonga Institute, our Q&A conversation for exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. We want to thank you for joining us today, of course, on behalf of our Board of Directors, advisors, and volunteers and supporting members. We want to thank you for joining us. The Cuyamonga Institute's an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And our focus is reflected in three main areas. It's experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of that deeper human connection to all of life. And that's part of our mission, to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. So as an educational institution, we do take an open approach, and we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. These Sunday discussions are available on demand. We have a couple hundred presentations available both as webcasts and podcasts. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, of course, we invite you to become a supporting member. And we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Cuyamonga Institute. Today, we're trying to put in perspective the incredible development of artificial intelligence, AI, and how it will and how it already has impacted us and changing the human story. What is the potential impact on the vital contributions of creativity and of spirit, and how this advancement will influence the evolution of humanity? As an extraordinary tool, we need to ask ourselves, will humanity retain that same drive, or do we risk a certain dependency on this technology? Does this remarkable technology have the potential to pave the way for a decline in us as individuals to actively participate in the field of intelligence that's emerging, which has always been there through a strong human endeavor by us being driven to try to understand, whether it's in the arts and the sciences, whether it's all the spectrums of how humans have had to come forth with knowledge and how we develop our story. And now we have this incredible tool at our fingertips. So finding and striking that right balance is a significant challenge, balancing that of human spirit, human intelligence, and that of what artificial intelligence has created, that narrative of humanity.
Well, indeed, Paul, depending on your point of view, AI is either promising or threatening to transform our culture in ways we can only imagine. I have a few philosophical questions over the evolution of computers in general. And as this new generation of artificial intelligence is said to be teaching itself and advancing in ways that even the tech experts don't understand, it's been infiltrating our lives quietly and comfortably behind the scenes for some time, and now we're being sold on all the benefits that it may bring. So just look at the acceleration of our creative genius that computers in general have afforded us. Now we have the promise of robots that can do all the boring and repetitive and dangerous jobs that will free us up for the more fun and creative tasks. But we've also long been spinning these cautionary tales in sci-fi books and films for decades, projecting our fears that AI and robots will one day overtake we fragile and limited humans and start running the show. The pros, the cons, the threat and the promise. It's so interesting. Now the conversations, though, are turning quite serious. AI is gaining measures of intelligence beyond our programming of it. It's teaching itself. What does that actually mean? What was the launching pad for this acceleration? What let the genie out of the bottle? Who or what is the genie? What's it accessing? And I wonder, as it's feeding off the vast store of human knowledge, that it is reflecting it back to us, all of our genius and all of our flaws. And worried as we are about unleashing an intelligent force that may overrun us, acting on behalf of its own agenda, well, we have only ourselves to look at. From the point of view of a global ecosystem in the midst of a sixth extinction,
Oh.
we can ask, yeah, we're smart, but how wise are we? And just what aspect of nature allows one species to run roughshod over all other life? How did we unlock nature's checks and balances? And if we can do that, and if AI reflects the best and the worst of us, perhaps we should be worried. What is the intelligent and part of AI? What's the artificial part? Is intelligence defined as thinking for oneself, primarily thinking of itself to the exclusion of everything else? That's a flaw in humanity's playbook. So the cautionary tales and the promise, what I see, science has charted how nature has in her arsenal a self-destruct button, extinctions. She wipes the slate clean to start anew. And she's only been at it for 14 billion years or so. Here on Earth, life always seems to find a way. And as nature always wins in the end, isn't our best course to align ourselves with nature? I think that there's a catch-22 in all this. The more we learn about our cosmos, the more tools we have to work with nature. So if we're going to align ourselves, our worldview, our hearts, our minds with nature and work towards sustaining a life on this planet in balance as caretakers, as responsible members of the way of life, maybe we can create a world for all of us, AI included. Maybe it can be a tool to help us achieve that. So these are just a few of the background questions I have running as we go on today. And we talk with someone who speaks computerese fluently. That's what we need here today. It's not us. So we can welcome David Hanley, a software architect whose code has set world records in high performance computing. And his work was used in part to find the top quark as we dissect the atoms. He's the president of Tower Running USA and has been ranked top 15th US and top 70th. And that's just his hobby, tower running. Do you even know what that is? I didn't. He had to explain that to me.
Okay.
He's traveled full time for 2 years in an RV before setting in the Verde Valley in Arizona. And he's a plant-based whole food advocate, as we are.
Yeah.
That's where we met him at one of those events over Thanksgiving. Sat down to this guy and had quite the conversation that I wanted to bring here to us today.
Yeah.
Hi, David, and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we get into, the big questions
big
on
question.
AI
And
and
we
where
ask
we
big ones in our
stand.
introductions.
Oh, yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into computers? How did you find that was like your gift in life?
Yeah, so I was probably about 10 years old, and I was at a friend's house, and he had an old machine there that you could actually punch some code into. And then he was showing me you could type 10 print Dave is cool. And then that would happen. And I was like, oh, you can make the machine do things. That's interesting. And I sort of messed around with that for 2 or 3 years, and I was not very serious. And then in high school, my first year of high school, I was just trying to figure out what I did. Like, what was I here for? What was I learning? And I had the first I think the first course that they ever had at my school about how to code, and I was just good at it. Like, I could just do it, and I could make the machine do
Natural
things.
language for you.
That just works for me. Like, my brain sees how to solve problems, and then that's what coding is. It's like, you have this problem, like, I need to issue the checks for this company. Like, that's a problem. How do you solve that? And then how do you solve it in some way that's actually good and makes sense and is elegant and is fast? So that was just like a natural talent for me at that point. And I said, well, I can do, there's all these things that I'm not good at, and then here's one thing that I am good at, so I'm going to do that.
That is so interesting because brains code, right? We invented this, we humans. It must be part of our natural thinking or a part of our evolution. I wonder. I mean, look at you. You're just a natural for this, as so many people are in that world.
I mean, software engineering is just like saying how to solve problems in like a very, very low level way. Like, if you're telling someone how to drive, I mean, you might say you can hop in the car, turn the key, push the gas and drive. But there's actually thousands of steps in there that we don't really think about that we just know how to actually do those. So when you're doing software, you would actually have to have that in like steps where it would be like, put your foot into the car, put your other foot in, sit on the seat, put your hand on the wheel. I mean, there'd be thousands of things there. And so when you're doing software, like that is how you think, and then like that's actually how you act in these like very
We
small
do that
steps.
naturally, but you're charting it out in a chart, flow chart, right?
Yes,
How to
that
get
exactly.
and then it can be reduced to A's and O's and ones, zeros
and ones. That's what it comes
Zeros
down
and
to.
ones,
Yeah. So I'm more literate. That's my language. English lit. Yeah. So well, tell us about your career looking at quarks. What's the relationship to that and physics?
Yeah. So part of what I focused on over the years is how to make code fast. And that's like my hobby. And that's what I find to be interesting. Like if there's some code that someone has that takes, 2 days to run, and then that code has to run in 2 hours. Like it's sort of been my job over the years to actually do that. Like, how can I optimize this? How can I make this run faster? How can I find like what steps in here are actually needed versus the ones that are not really geared towards the actual task that we're doing. So I was actually working in college on some code that would store data super, super fast. That was the goal. And Fermilab, which was actually near where I lived, had that need, because when they searched for the quarks, like at that point, that was actually making terabytes of data per hour. And back in 1993, that was huge, huge data. Like no one knew how to handle that. No one knew how to actually cope with that data size. And so they heard about what I was doing at my college, which was this actually worked for like school. And so my actual college farmed me out to them to help them use my actual tool I was writing to actually store the data that they had. And that was actually used to help find the actual top quark. I think it was in 1996.
So you helped build the infrastructure that gave us that access.
Yes. I mean, someone else would have, done that at some point, but it was sort of fun to be involved. Like, it's just a nice, cool thing in my history.
And it just shows how computers are helping us further our reach into the secrets of the cosmos and more, and ourselves. Yeah. Wow. So run fast is a key for you. And is that what the appeal of running up the stairs inside very tall towers is about? Run fast?
Yeah. So that's an odd sport, and I sort of came to it in an odd way. So I was about 35 or so. And I was sort of getting really heavy and out of shape, and I had back pain. I was just feeling like I'm aging really fast. Like, and if I don't do something, I'm going to be, 40, and I'm going to be far too heavy to do things that I like, and actually, and just like, be happy and healthy. And so I knew I had to do cardio, but I didn't really know how to do it. And I couldn't really run. Like, I could run half a block and I'd be red and I'd be kind of not functioning properly. And I thought, well, if I go to the gym and I run, like everyone's going to see how bad I am.
I can testify he's very slim and fit right now, and that's part of the whole food plant-based diet thing too.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
These are the key. Yeah. But go ahead. Yeah.
And so I said, what can I do at the gym where no one's going to know that I'm bad at it? And I saw there's a machine that was Stairmaster. I'm like, well, no one's ever on there. And when someone's on there, like no one knows what's fast and what's slow. So I did the actual Stairmaster because I thought people wouldn't know that I was bad at it. No one would watch me and think that guy's out of shape and he shouldn't be on there. So I did that for about 2 years, and I lost about 50 pounds or so over those 2 years. And someone mentioned that there's stair races. There's actual races that are up these tall buildings. So I was in Chicago at this point. So Sears Tower was this huge thing for me. It was the coolest building in the world. Right. And I heard there was a race up Sears Tower, and I thought, I have to do that. And I did start to do those races, and I sort of made friends at the races. Like, it's this odd social circle. And there was no actual ranking system. So nobody knew who was the best or who should be the top racer in the country. So I thought, well, I write software, I can code up a whole ranking system.
Mm.
Of
So I
course.
actually did that. And I thought, no
People.
one's going to care but me. I thought I'll just do this and no one's going to care. It'll just be for my own personal use. But I did post it online, and I started getting emails constantly about why is this race not counting? How come I'm not sixth versus fifth?
Oh dear.
And I found out that lots of people care.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah.
Well, some people climb mountains, but you climb the stairs inside. I mean, it's kind of perfect. Wow. Oh my
So this is a
gosh.
good balance to
Yeah.
that part of your brain that's
Talk
involved in
about getting out from
programming.
behind
Yeah.
the
Programming and
computer.
sitting at a
Yeah.
desk and being lost in that world, because the world of programming is definitely a world unto itself. You step inside and you go into the mathematical analysis and the sequence of events and all of that. And then you get outside and you're doing something
Well,
physical.
also tend the machine, right? Tend the technology.
Yeah.
Mule it.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
good
Keep what
balance
you call
between the
work in
two.
order.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Balance.
Yeah.
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 I'll say like we are, I mean, we aren't just brains and we aren't just bodies. I mean, we're actually both.
Mm.
And then how our body functions, I think does impact our actual brains and like how well we think too. And
Yeah.
if you want to think properly, like you should be, somewhat fit and should eat and should eat healthy and like, have adequate rest. Like
Yeah.
all those things matter.
Yeah.
Beautifully
Yeah.
said.
Good
Yeah.
point.
So now the world of AI and what's happening in the world that surrounds us and the world of technology, because you've been, even though it's a more recent discovery to the general population, AI has been around for decades. There's been things going on behind the scenes, but now it's kind of like
Well, think of
because of
every Amazon package you
because of
deliver, robots and
yeah.
AI
Well,
been
that's one
shipping
part
that
of
to
it,
us.
but also just the idea of what we see with Chat GPT, where we're all of
Yeah.
a sudden seeing tools available to us
Do we need to write anymore?
it is,
A computer
all
will
the,
do it for
yeah,
us.
all these
Yeah.
different things that are coming forward. So where do we fit into all that spectrum, and what is your perspective, and maybe give
Well,
us,
give us a little history in the evolution of computers,
yeah,
and then now
well,
why
starting
AI is suddenly teaching itself. What does that even mean? I mean, just give us a baseline
Mhm.
to foundation to understand what you're going to say.
Okay, so this starts around I think 1850 or so. There were some
I wasn't there.
so it actually goes back more than you think, I would guess.
I know, the
So there was a
Antikythera
man
disc.
called Babbage, and then he had the idea to actually build a machine that could actually do math and actually solve problems, and that was called the analytical engine. And then so he had people, and so he didn't at that point he actually couldn't have a machine, like he couldn't build it, but he was just thinking about what that would be like, how it would function. There'd be maybe gears and sprockets, and it would pull on strings, and that would open up a gate, things like this. And he had people, he and others would write code that would be on an engine that could work theoretically, but actually hadn't been built yet. And so one of the early things that they wrote was some like software to actually play games and chess. So somebody wrote some code that they thought would actually play chess. So that was, I think, in the 1800s at this point. People were actually thinking about that. And then I think the first modern software that actually played chess was about the 1950s or so. So there were some people doing that. And that was kind of like the first AI software out there. And that was the Greenblatt engine, it was called. And that kind of kicked things off with the AI scene. And there were other software there were other things being done at that point. There was the first chat engine. It was called Eliza.
Eliza.
And it could, but it was just code that someone wrote. I mean, someone said if this person says hi, say hi back. And if they say, how are you? Say I'm fine. How are you? So it was all hand-coded rules. And the early things that actually played chess were like the same. Someone said, okay, move your center pawns forward, or move your rooks to an open file. And they would write code to actually make the engine do that. But it was not thinking for itself. It was just following rules that were actually entered to it. And over the years, that was how things were done until probably the last 10 or so years. Like everything that played chess or self-drove or would solve certain problems, it would have someone like me enter all the rules. That would actually guide the software to its task. And about 10 years ago, people started to say, this isn't working. Like,
Or we could do
they
better.
could beat humans at chess at some point, but they weren't good at it. I mean, they didn't play nice chess. It wasn't pretty. And it was this like huge effort to actually build something that would actually do well. So humans started to say, what if we just had the machine learn from the actual basic rules? And this was something that could happen at that point, because to have a machine learn chess might take hundreds of thousands of hours. And then we just didn't have the time, and we didn't have the machines. But like now we have machines that are faster, and you can build these like thousands of servers into one room, and then have them
Run
each take like
billions of trials, right?
billions of trials, and then that's how it works. And you know, that could take years of actual time, like thousands of years of actual time. But if you have 1,000 servers doing this at like once, then that task that, you know, should take thousands of years could take 2 or 3 months. And that's been the actual big change that we have now. So most of the AI now that we're actually doing well with is this self-learning systems, where we just give it rules and then some data and say, you know, think for thousands of years on how to actually make this happen.
So you're building like, okay, like the cosmos is 14 billion years of practice, but now
Yes.
you're compressing that into many, 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 many trials. So you're accelerating the learning curve
Yes,
for a
exactly.
system. Got it. And so you said pretty chess. You mean elegant solutions, or do you mean, you know, what do you mean by
Very pretty.
that? And now
Yeah,
computers are actually just squashing any human chess
they are.
experts. So that's turned a whole page, right?
Yeah. So back in high school, when I first started to get serious about software, I thought, what could I do that's interesting? I said, I will write software that plays chess, and I'll learn about AI. So probably sophomore year in college, actually start high school, actually started doing that. So I actually wrote a program that actually did play chess. It was okay. But I had to learn how to also play in order to actually do the software too.
Sure, that makes
So I
sense.
started to play, you know, somewhat like seriously. I was like um, I was an okay player back then, but I sort of understood there are games that are pretty and there are ones that are ugly. Like you can win in this very ugly, boring style where you maybe make a tiny weakness in they're in their army, and then you hammer on that for the next 100 moves. It's just a boring, dreary style of play. And there were games where you'd win by like, you know, sacrificing your rook and your king and your like queen, and then you had this like awesome, like, you know, ending win that was like this. It was just nice to see. Like you would see it and go, oh, that is beautiful. Like as an actual, you know, chess player, you like see that. And I actually played um Deep Blue, which was the first engine that actually beat the human world
IBM.
champion.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing where they had a whole team of experts. They had, I think, 6 or 7 like really strong players working on the engine, and they would and they would actually see its games, and they would find errors, and they would find ways to actually fix the errors in the code. Once again, that's a lot of human effort. And human chess, even back in the 1800s, was this very nice style of play. It was like pretty, it was elegant. And probably around like the 1950s or so, there was this new style of chess that was very ugly. It's just
Like
these boring,
brutish.
brutish games, right? It was not pretty to see. And that got into the engines too, because that was a popular human style of like chess. So the machines played this really ugly, boring style that was not fun to play against. It was fun to watch. Nobody really liked it, but that still won the games. So the really interesting thing that happened is sort of I stopped playing chess because it was this boring style everywhere, and everyone was like playing these ugly games, and I wasn't really interested. And there was one engine called Alpha Zero that came out about 3.5 years ago. And it was the first one that was self-taught. So they just gave it the rules of chess, said, here's how the pieces move, here's how you win. And it played billions of self games, billions and billions. And the really interesting thing was, because there was no human input, it played this gorgeous style of chess. It was awesome to watch. It would like, you know, sacrifice pieces in these unobvious ways. It would go after the king. It would like, you know, put a pawn here. And you're like, why is it doing that? That makes no sense. And then 30 moves later, like, oh, that pawn wins the game for it now. Like, how did it know that was
30
going to,
moves later. Wow.
Wow.
it
Wow.
would, it
So
would
it
actually
seems to
find
have
these things.
a sense of aesthetics or taste almost, or is that
And
us putting that
perspective.
on?
Yeah.
Is that just built into how to win? It also happens to be pretty and aesthetic and surprising and elegant.
That's what
Those are
I think is
interesting
the case,
questions.
actually.
Mm.
Like, I think that things that are really, really nice to look at, or kind
Mhm.
of like, pull your heartstrings, as like, far far as them being elegant, are also things that also work really well. And then
And
we have this
nature,
sensitive
you could say
brain
that's
that
true of nature herself because she's
absolutely.
majestic, she's elegant, she's beautiful, she's surprising, she's mastery, right? You
Mm.
could say that. Maybe
I
we're
mean, you
just
see
built in to recognize that.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you see a bird, and that bird has this gorgeous shape and it looks really good, but that
Yeah.
shape is the best way for that bird to like fly and
Yeah.
actually function. And if you
Yeah.
see this like river in some valley and it's just gorgeous and it's bendy and there's trees, like that water has actually found the best path through the valley. So we
Yeah.
have this in our head that things that work really well look nice to us too.
Right.
Mm.
I
That's
think it's
interesting.
programmed into us to recognize that. I mean, you think of cosmetics are about organizing your face more aligned to the divine proportions and stuff.
Right.
Mhm.
It's just built in. Music,
Well, it's
same
interesting that
thing.
with once the computer, once the design, the programs have these tools available to them to say, you do it yourself, that all of a
And it
sudden
arrives
that
at that.
incredible, what?
And it arrives at that itself. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it designs this incredible,
Yeah.
beautiful fluidity. And like you're mentioning, 30 moves ahead of time. I don't know if the standard top world players are thinking 30 moves
Oh, I'm
ahead of
sure they
time.
are. Yeah.
No, he's saying no.
Not generally, no.
No,
Oh, interesting.
it opens up another whole doorway that, yeah, just amazing
So
to
you
think
can,
of, to think of.
so that gives us a little hope, doesn't it? In
Yeah.
terms of the,
And I know coming back to some of the original introductions that Laura and I talked about, we also touched on that anxiety that we feel as a humanity, like, okay, now where's this going? And, are we going to write our own poetry? Are we just going to have AI write it for us? Are we going to write our own music
can we do
or are we
math
going to,
anymore when
are we going to,
AI does it
are
all
we
for
going to put
us?
2 or 3 words in
Yeah.
and say, finish it for me? I want to write a song like James Taylor, but combine Beyonce and somebody else. And all of a sudden, poof, there it is. It's a little bit intimidating and maybe
Mhm.
suffocating to the human spirit because we're not being driven as much. We don't have that same need within ourselves to draw on the amount of time it takes to pull up those creative inputs.
Are
I
we?
definitely feel that too.
Mm.
I mean, part of me likes the fact that, I mean, I started playing chess again because now I can see, oh, there's this way to play that's like pretty, but also still win. So I learned from the engine how to
Mm.
actually upgrade my own chess.
Yeah.
But the counterpoint of that is that the engines are so good at it now. Like, why do we bother? Like, there's no
Yeah.
so an actual cell phone running software can actually beat the best human players easily
Mhm.
nowadays. There's
Yeah.
Why bother
not even
climbing the mountain
close.
if you know you'll never get to the top, right? There's
Uh-huh.
always,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so it's maybe possibly a laziness to it. But, this institute and the founder of this institute was functioning on that concept that the human spirit, that there is that ability for us to dive deep within ourselves, within our own humanity of consciousness and draw up this wellspring of creativity of decision making, whether it's from the world of science or the world of art. It's all one world of the human story that's being developed. And so part of that concern that I'm expressing is that some of that will be less available because it will only be a few people, less people will be driven to want to take the time it takes. I was thinking this morning of a really odd scenario. I said, what if I went into the chat GPT and put in something like, what if Joseph Campbell was still alive today and he was ready to write his next book, taking into consideration all of the discoveries and the advancements that happened since his death. So we can write a new book by Joseph Campbell, drawing on all of
Or
his work,
taking his core ideas
his
and
core
taking them
ideas,
further.
but also taking all the new discoveries
Can
since his
AI
death.
make
And now
that
we can
kind
make
of
a new
leap?
Joseph Campbell book
Is it just better at telling us the tales that we've already told
right,
ourselves, or can
right.
it make some new
I'm
leaps of
just
imagination?
drawing up some maybe
Yeah.
possibly crazy ideas, but that's sort of there. I mean, that technology exists now.
Yeah, I mean, ChatGPT is like still pretty new, so it is bad at some things.
Yeah.
But it's also shockingly good at some things too, honestly. Like, I can ask it to write code for me, and it'll often do it on the first try. Like, I'll
Ah,
say, write me some code that like reads a file that looks like this, and then does this to the data, and then outputs a file like this. And about half the time, it actually gets it right. So
mm,
that's like pretty amazing right there that it can even do that. And I've asked it to write me like a one pager that like advances this idea, and it'll write a pretty nice essay.
mm.
Um, but what's interesting too about ChatGPT is it a lie sometimes.
Yeah, I heard this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've like had the experience, but I've asked it like, hey, like I want to write some code that does this. Is there any software out there that already exists that will actually do this for me? And it'll tell me, oh yeah, there's this software package called so and so. It has these features. It's just lying.
There
Hmm.
isn't such a thing.
Yeah.
It actually
What's
wants
the
to make me happy.
motivation to do that? Oh, okay. So,
It's actually trying to answer what I'm asking it, and it's learned that it's better to make up an answer than to say I don't know. Or
Just like
like
a
that's
child.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
childlike. Yeah.
I didn't
Mhm.
break it. No.
Please, mommy, at all costs.
The
exactly
dog
that.
broke it.
Yeah.
The dog ate my homework. Yeah.
And actually, sort of following on to one thing that you said earlier, like the change that's happened in AI over the last 10 years,
Yeah.
it is bothersome in that the old software, we could tell why it was doing what it was doing. So if it made
Yeah.
some kind of error and it said, oh, like if it made a bad chess move, or if it chose the wrong way to solve some problem, or if it was a self-driving system and it drove the car into a wall, you can actually look at the code and say, oh, that's because the software engineer made an error or they didn't think of this case. Now, because they're self-learning, you really can't tell why it's doing what it's doing.
It's not leaving a trail behind that we can read.
Like
Mm.
there's
It's
no
keeping
rule in
its
there.
secrets unto itself, in other words.
Yeah.
How is that coded? Where does that live for
Mm.
the next computer to take that and do it,
The world.
right? Or is it just putting into some big neural net brain, or what is it?
Neural nets are one of the big things now. So the ones that actually play like chess now, there are these like large self-trained neural networks, and it's these actual virtual cells, and they have these virtual dendrites too. And then so they'll learn how to play chess with this like large neural network, and we can't look at this and say, oh, like this cell makes it make this move, or like this like one link here causes it to push that pawn up to that square where it's actually useful 30 moves later.
Mm.
We don't know. Like we just have no real clue as to why it's doing what it's doing. I mean, you would
Okay.
have to look at these billions of cells. Yes.
So we're decoding DNA, and we can say, oh, look at this code over here. It's programming the organism to do this, but we can do that to ourselves and other life forms. We haven't yet
Yes.
learned how to do it to our computers
Yeah.
Or our
that are now
brains.
evolving unto itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. And that kind of worries me because at like some point, I mean, we're going to start to give like AI brains tasks for us, and we're not going to know why they fail sometimes, and we're not going to
Or if it's
understand. So,
accurate. Yeah.
Oh.
well, the actual cars that actually self-drive actually starting to use these like AI brains that are just trained. So someone didn't add in a rule saying don't drive the car into a wall. We just told the brain don't do that, and it actually figured out how to
Mm.
actually not have the car go into a wall. But
Mm.
we don't know why it's not doing it, and we don't know if it'll always do it, or what
Yeah.
its rules are for when it actually will drive the car into a wall. We can't really tell. We can just
Or run
observe.
over a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
gonna
mean,
be.
we can observe that it's not doing it, but we can't say why.
Mm.
Or that will always not do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What
Maybe
are
they
the
turn on us.
circumstances under which it might do that?
You're
And
right.
Mark is confirming in the chat room, because as a scientist, saying, yeah, he has lots of issues with Chat GPT because it's coming up with dumb answers in programming and science. He thinks it's because what you talked about, it's not reasoning, it's just throwing stuff together that it's seen before.
Do you want to say more to that, Mark? Yeah, add to this conversation.
If he likes to, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've used ChatGPT a lot. It's terrible at mathematics at the moment, but in statistics and programming and science, I've asked it quite a lot of stuff, and it'll often come back with solutions that are kind of on the internet already. So it'll come back with a program fragment that it's seen before. And I had my worry about AI is that it's not, thankfully, it's not actually reasoning. It's just putting these different things together that's probabilistically likely. So I think it's a fairly dumb system in terms of its intelligence so far. But when it starts to reason, then I think we've got it'll be really quite scary. But I think the problem is people are thinking that these things are much smarter than they are, because really it's just taking a piece of information, saying what's the most probable thing that's going to come up next, and throwing them together. So
So it's
I'm not so worried
canvassing.
about it at the moment.
So it's canvassing the World Wide Web, finding keywords
Worldwide.
and assembling them together, basically. So it's doing a lot of data retrieval for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how members of our community have been suggesting we use it for different tasks. You know,
Oh.
have got a huge database. Or when you, we've got Tony, our astrophysicist friend in the room. When you're compiling all this knowledge, how do you sort through it, and what sense does it make of it?
Yeah.
Right? You've got billions of points of data. Let's come. It just can take human people years and years.
Right.
Yeah.
What can it retrieve and
Yeah.
collate and make sense of? So
I
that's
think
the
it's
beauty of it. Yeah.
it's a very useful thing, and I have used it myself a few times. But one of the problems is it doesn't source its references, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't know whether you can trust it, and it'll often come up with a very authoritative sounding answer, which
Mhm.
is nonsense. But that's the danger that people use it, like, you know, early days of Wikipedia or whatever, come
Yeah.
up with nonsense.
Right.
Good one,
So
Mark.
that's where human
Yeah.
intelligence
Yeah.
and reason kind of wins the day.
Good
Yeah.
points, Mark. Thank you.
But
Yeah.
then this is its infancy.
Yeah.
How is it? And what was the algorithm that was written, David, that allowed this leap? Because we had to give it a leg up to get to this point where it's running the billions and billions. What's the next step? What's the future?
Quantum systems are actually starting to actually come online now. So in our hardware right now, like one piece of data is either a 1 or a 0. Quantum systems, you can have the same data that's in both a 1 and an actual 0 state at the exact same time. And then if you actually do an operation to it, it'll actually make more than one substate. So you can solve some problems can be solved much faster that way. And I think having the machines think falls under that group. So you'll be able to have a machine that can do billions of operations in just like 1 second, which is much faster than how things currently are. So yeah, software that would even now take thousands of hours to run will run in, like, seconds or minutes. So that's going to be an actual very large change as well.
Mm-hmm.
So quantum physics describes that state, right? It's all potential, and it depends on. So it's just imitating what the laws of nature. We're able to shove it because the nature's constructed like this, and we're just or is this happening all the time, and we just don't understand it, know it, recognize it? What's going on here? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Our
So
logic is lagging, or our understanding is lagging of how the world operates.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a very, I mean, we've actually known about quantum states since I think about the 1930s or so. That's when we started to understand that's how the world works.
Yeah.
And it was always kind of theoretical, but there are some cases where it actually matters. So modern hardware, I don't know if you follow this, but
No.
Chips have like very tiny wires on them. And they've been getting, and then how fast a chip runs is sort of based on how large the wires are. And the actual smaller they get, the actual faster that chip runs. But we're actually having a problem now because they're like so small that the actual particles flowing through those wires are in these states where they're not here and they aren't there. So if you have two small wires and if they're close, you can actually have the actual particle jump from one to the other just by random chance. So we're sort of at the limit now where we can't make chips that much faster just by making the actual wires smaller. We have to have larger chips that can do more things at the same time, or break the task into like, 2 parts and 1 part's here and parts there, and then you kind of
It keeps it
merge them
distinct.
later.
Mhm.
But now we're saying, well, we can actually use that. We can actually use the fact that this actual particle is here and it's there at the exact same time. And so if we say, well, there's some number, it could be 1 or 10. And so we actually set things up so the actual data is both 1 and 10. And then we do operations on that data. And it's in all these like states afterward where there's more than one state that actually that data is in.
I have to say it rather kind of imitates our work of being in 2 states at one time, holding 2 rather opposite states simultaneously. That is so intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're pushing into further understand. It's always been here, these laws of nature, which is pushing into understanding them and utilizing them.
So
Seeing this quantum leap, right? Just seeing this like added dimensionality to it. It's like, wow.
So, the reality is all of us that are novices that are outside the general public, I mean, there's no stopping this. It's just a matter of figuring out how we integrate it and how much we want to integrate it and how much we don't have a choice.
And we keep ahead of it.
Yeah, how much we don't have a choice where, it used to be that there was such a restriction of controlling your personal data. You really have no
Forget it.
control any longer. I mean, I remember going to when
Wow.
we went to Stonehenge, we went over to Europe and they had cameras at the intersections. And I remember saying to the driver, oh, they would never allow that in the US. They would never allow us to have our pictures taken at
We've got privacy issues.
we have privacy over here. Well, now
Yeah.
it's facial recognition, and every place you go, everybody knows who you are, what you're doing, what your bank
Yeah.
account is,
Yeah.
who
And it's
you're
all
who you're
sold
related
with for
to.
the benefits, right?
Yeah, and if you want to know,
Security and safety as
and
opposed to Big Brother watching you.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not even expressing concern because it's beyond. It doesn't matter. It's there.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to navigate the world that we live in, and it's a
The
strange,
CIA now
strange.
has all of our phone records, I just read.
Oh, they have. Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So we're being, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if
Interesting.
there's a question there. It's just a comment, but a question too. How do you see all of this personal data?
When does the tail start wagging the dog?
That's kind of a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of like having myself not be like fully known to the entire world.
Yeah.
But I have largely given up on that. Like I just figure everyone, like I don't really hide my phone number anymore because if someone wants it, they can get it.
Yeah.
So I don't bother trying to keep it off the web or like, making sure that only certain people get it. So I sort of given up on that. And like, I mean, I don't want the feds to have it always.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But as far as AI goes, I mean, there are certain things that I think I'm not going to be able to actually beat a machine at this. So I'm not even going to like try to work on this area. I mean, for like chess, like I still play for fun, but
Mhm.
I'm not playing to be a grandmaster at this point or like, try to be world champion or like, that kind of thing. I'm like, no, because even if I'm the world champion, I'm still going to lose to like, someone's cell phone. Why should I bother? But that's kind of not always true, I think, because also like I still run and I can't beat a car. Like I can still lose to a car every time, but I still think it's nice to go out and run.
Or a horse.
But
Yeah.
but I'm not running to outrun cars. I'm running to, have a nice life and to like
Or
have some
compete with your
joy.
own best record, right? Or
Right.
to just have other reasons aesthetically. I enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
fun. I can run in nature. I can run upstairs in a building. I can bridge those 2 environments. It's kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
But are you playing chess with other humans or are you playing with machines?
About half and half.
Yeah.
Like I play other machines. I do play humans online somewhat, and I do and I do play software like in part because it's always there. Like I can always find a game instantly and I can have it play at a certain level. Like I can tell it play like, someone that's rated, 1800 and it'll do it. And then so I can have the kind of game I'm looking for at times.
I'd like to open this up to your questions. So raise your hand and come
Yeah.
on screen because I know you have philosophical questions about this. But in the meantime, as you're doing that, I want to ask, so is there going to be a growing bevy of Luddites here that are proud to be unplugged. Because I have friends that say, I've unplugged from the news. On weekends, I just unplug my phone. I get back into nature. I want to hit that balance. So, and if AI does get out of control, where's the plug that we pull? We would disassemble all of creation, all of our civilization, right? Not creation, civilization, because we're so dependent on it.
Right.
So, I mean, is there a final stopgap measure? Or as the Matrix points out, do the machines then start harnessing us for the power batteries that they need, right? So that's an interesting question. But
well, like the one of our participants last week said that she has a technology fast every Thursday where her kids and her family turn off the computers and the phones and the TVs. They have one day a week they do a fast. So instead of fasting food, now we're fasting technology. But still, even if you turn off the technology, as soon as you go out of your house and you're on the street, the technology's tracking
well,
you.
it's buzzing through you, right?
Yeah.
Or here's the story that I heard from, I was sitting next to a nurse in Australia at some dinner, and he was telling me the story of how he was the nurse that helped these young teens, Australian Aboriginal teens that were living out in the bush. When the government rounded them up, they were out on a walkabout. And so they didn't get rounded up, but they come back to their camp and all the adults are gone. Everybody's gone. They're swept away, and they saw these weird tracks, the tire tracks, which they'd never seen before. This was decades ago. And so eventually they set out to go find them. And so they use modern technology to find tracks, and they show up in Jeeps, and the kids are terrified by that. They're growing older, and they had this decision to make. Do I come back to civilization? They recognized members of their own tribe that had been caught up, that went out and spoke their language. They actually recognized a footprint of a family member, and that gave them the courage to continue the conversation. And they said that they knew how to lure them back to civilization. They thought they were, quote, rescuing them. They put out sugar. Oh, come and taste this bag of sugar. Come.
Oh, geez.
And that's, they said, with like, oh my God, we are biologically programmed to seek out sweets and fats, right? That's just how we're programmed, because back in the day, that was a very rare food sustenance, and that's what helped us identify good, you know, we need that. So here they put a biological imperative cue in front of them, trigger in front of them. Oh, well, let's go back. And so he got to be the nurse to help when they come in. When they were brought in as teenagers, just in off the bush, they were examined by a doctor, and physical specimens are perfect. Wow, human beings can live out in the bush. We can find our way. We can forage. We know the rules of nature. We adhere to them. We can live quite healthily, and they were happy, right? You come into civilization, and guess what? Oh, their health deteriorated. They become artists. You know, they've got issues adjusting to civilization. A couple of them stayed back and didn't come. We don't know what happened to them, right? Their story's not told. But some of them decided to stay out in the bush and live in that traditional way. So it's so interesting. I guess my point is, at some point, is humanity going to have that same question? Do we fully throw in our lot, right, with the advancements of civilization? Or does some of us retain one foot in our natural setting?
Is AI the sugar?
Is it going to be any natural? Yeah.
Is AI the sugar?
What are the lures?
I mean, it's so
our biological imperatives amped up to the point where it's become like a drug, right?
And just in terms of administrating this institute, I can't help but see AI being a tool in pieces that work. And it's like, I can't, you know, it's like sugar. I can sit here and rack my brain. Let me just see what AI says. Oh yeah, well, that kind of reminds me of something. And then I go back and forth. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that's a question for you, David. Laura's asking.
I mean, it's just to pose a question. What are we up against? What are the triggers that is going to lead us without or even knowing it down one path or another?
Right.
And, you know, what are the consequences? What's the end of this arc?
Yeah.
Where's this journey?
No one's going to answer that question, but yeah.
And at the same time, the more that this tool is used to help us gather information to understand our own workings, our own self, the workings of the cosmos, we have better tools. Can we use it to write our course, get our climate back in order, get the species and the biodiversity going again, can we use it to save ourselves and our planet? What? Or are we just going to use it to go off world and ravage the next planet?
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
that's a lot of content there.
We got the perfect guy who's looking at exo worlds and habitable worlds out there. Tony, hello.
Oh, Tony's got, Tony, I'll bring you up.
Yeah.
Well, hi. What interesting questions. Will we use it or will it use us?
Right.
I guess it's sort of a seminal question
Will it
here.
be a symbiotic relationship? Yeah.
Well, I didn't say that, but that might be. Who knows?
Yeah.
I keep on thinking that chess is an analog for war, and I'm sure that this is something that's heavily used in that community.
In the military.
Both in terms of short-term and long-term diplomatic and other things that are happening. We notice that there are events in the world that may be correlated in some strange and interesting ways. So I won't say more than that. I think back to a book I read in 1965 called A for Andromeda by the astronomer Fred Hoyle.
Oh yeah, Fred Hoyle.
I was working at a large new radio telescope then, and it was about a large new radio telescope where a message came from somewhere else. It took over the computer at the facility, and the computer at the facility was linked. This was before we talked about the internet with many other computers. And pretty soon, all the computers that were linked through a vast network were not ours anymore. They were after something else. And I think of this as being sort of foretelling of the internet and foretelling of AI. Maybe that's sort of like from Andromeda. Recently, I saw a movie on the airplane called Megan. I imagine that many have seen it, about this sweet Barbie-like doll that this little girl fell in love with, but it was programmed in AI, and it learned everything she did and everything people did because she wanted to be like a person. And then she started killing everything and everybody that got in the way of this little girl, because that's what humans do. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to look at it. All right, these are just little things that are rolling through my mind here. But one thing that's kind of center place in the world now is complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dealing both with a lot of knowledge and a lot of complexity. A Nobelist is coming out here in January, and one of his functions is to deal with some questions of complexity. And I'm wondering how AI joins in that structure where there are probably enough variables still to worry even the largest array of computers.
She's nodding. Is that a good sign?
I don't know. It may be a little scary, but I'm actually thinking I can actually talk intelligently with John Mather when he comes out with what you're going to tell me.
Yeah, so you're asking about, are there some problems that are so large right now that we can't have software that could actually solve them because there's like too many inputs, or there's
either that or use the word solve, and then there's also the word in science and technology to bound the problem, and there's a limit to how far one can go. I mean, if you look at the number of atoms on the surface of the Earth, in the atmosphere, there are a lot of them, and we have fluid mechanics and other things to radiate transfer and stuff like that can describe pretty well what happens. But at some level, there's something else going on.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting thing. So the actual weather on the Earth has an effect from like every atom on the Earth, right? Because two atoms bounce and one goes that way, and then that is an atom, and that causes the cloud to have some shape that's like different. And then over the course of years, that like one cloud, that like one drop from the cloud actually changed like the whole pattern of the actual weather. So that can definitely happen. So you would have to have a machine that has the actual number of bits as there are atoms on the Earth, which we don't have right now. But yeah, humans have the same problem. So if we're trying to understand the actual weather, we don't have as many neurons in our brain as the Earth has atoms on it. Certainly not. It's like far, far less. So we have to like abstract the problem. We have to say, okay, don't look at each atom, but you look at this area of the Earth's surface, or like you look at this region, or in some way look at a cloud as a cloud, and then not every drop inside of it. So you can still solve fairly large problems, but you're not going to have everything. You're never going to have full accuracy. I mean, there are some problems that any problem where the input's changing in like one small way will actually change the whole problem. I mean, you can't solve that overall.
But I don't think one little atom is going to change.
No, I'm going to agree with you, but if I could, I guess my point is, are we going to carve into and change the field of complexity in some way with AI? We're not going to solve everything, but entropy, we do categorize what we can't. We do categorize what we can't codify, often in the term entropy, and that's always going to be there. But I'm just wondering, is this in play now? Have you heard of dialogues on this? What are we? I mean, I'm sure we're trying to improve weather predictions right now, and of course that they seem to be changing rapidly, but that's a whole nother story. But
I'm wondering if AI could run all the different scenarios of how we heal the climate. I was just reading that somebody's trying to get some big concerns in trying to get farmers to put rock dust on their fields because the carbon, the salt in the rock dust from lava and volcanic eruptions can absorb the carbon. And so that'd be a good way to sequester carbon. Well, it's interesting. Nature's already found that out. She spews volcanoes, the rock dust falls, it's good for crops, right? And maybe it's helping to actually absorb some of the carbon that was just spewed. So it's interesting. I mean, can we look at nature's self-correcting, self-stabilizing feedback loops? Can we harness some of those? I'm hoping AI could run scenarios to go, hey, you've got limited time and resources and funds and programs. Which ones are going to work?
Right.
Can we start employing this to run some of this? Can we stop the wars and get together and start looking at, hey, we're on the little spaceship Earth. Can we help write its course?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're in a little terrarium in a little closed system. Can we start working towards life here?
Amplify what you're saying, Laura. In Germany, I recently heard an interesting talk, actually came out of the University of California there, about the study of the smallest insects. And the insects have impacts and forces that are like 1,000 Gs, much higher than we can. And the materials and the way the materials are put together in the various tentacles and wings and stuff like this, there's a lot to be learned by that right now. So there's a whole process of reverse engineering of insects. I think that was out of UC.
Nature's found all these solutions. Can we harness those?
So there are some things that can be mined, but that's a little different than AI.
Yeah.
Well. Thank you very much. I'm really enjoying this, David, and I must admit there are concerns, but we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Tony, as you explore and you working on the programs to go look at habitable planets out there, is the goal to like, oh, let's just decamp here and go there and start all over again? And isn't there some set of, well, maybe we should learn to do it better, right? Create our civilization a little bit better to be sustainable. Are there efforts, are there conversations going on and the levels in which you work that are also, can we learn to do it right this time around? And let's employ it here first.
Well, I think it will be a while before that happens. And of course, because we're going to have relatively crude evidence of looking at habitable planets around other stars coming out, even with the next great mission. We may see if it has oceans, we may see if it has oxygen and that kind of thing, carbon dioxide, other manifestations. And there are a whole series of signatures of life, but we're not going to really communicate with that life or be able to.
I realize it's light years away,
I would
but I
say-
think these are.
I would say, well, it's more than that. We're talking about a century away at least.
Yeah.
And doing things we never dreamed possible. Just like today, we're doing things that were never dreamed possible when I was in graduate school.
Right.
So there's a whole kind of a step forward of things.
That's
I
true.
will say that there is a consciousness of what you're talking about as we go away from the Earth, as we go to the moon and planets. And I've designed a number of instruments to go to other planets. And there is a parameter called planetary protection, where you do things to sterilize everything that's going to land on Mars or on a comet or on the moon or whatever. You do not want to bring the Earth to there. That's done pretty well. What we do a terrible job on, however, is low Earth orbit protection, which is absolutely filthy. And right now, extremely dangerous. There are little particles flying around at amazing speeds that can do really nasty things.
Mm.
So we really messed up low Earth orbit.
We're importing all sorts of stuff. Okay.
Well, I think in all of the sciences, they'd be so deeply impacted by this AI, the way that things are speeding up. I know I was thinking about Fred Smith, who's in the room, is a Vedic scholar, but he spent a lifetime of studying the Vedas and looking at all the different translations and all this kind of stuff. And is the AI technology of the next generation of scholars that follow in his footsteps. And they have this new technology available to them where they can do an analysis in a second faster than maybe, years of work that Fred did. I don't know how that all is going to happen, but it's changing everything in the world of sciences at such a fast pace. So I mean, that's something too, Tony, that I was thinking about your world of astronomy and how that's being impacted. Of course, we have no way of even comprehending that, but it seems like it's going to jump us forward in a way that can't even.
And what's the
grasp.
relation to AI and how it's working in this quantum level that David described in our consciousness,
Right.
following the same laws of nature, the same workings?
If I could, I wanted to say one thing that's interesting, and yes, we do have the possibility of deciphering many things. I chaired a conference at the Maxwell Museum called Astronomy and Ceremony in the Prehistoric Southwest, and there were people from all over there. And one of the questions or topics that came up was the power of linguistics. And inside the power of linguistics is a method called content analysis.
Right.
This is something that AI could do magnificently and in great. For example, it was used by the State Department years ago, where every year the May Day slogans coming out of the Soviet Union would be analyzed and characterized with a degree of hostility. Little things like that have been used, but there was concern about using this on the ethnographic records, which anthropologists had used, starting, there are people like Harrington that had 20,000 pages of notes on indigenous people and their detailed practices, and that was when they were wide open. And now these notes, right up till when people started getting nervous about this about 30 or 40 years ago, could be used to reveal a lot of things which are not wanted to be revealed.
Interesting. And maybe there are secrets we don't want to
simply
share.
by the degree of repetition, such and such mentioned such and such 12 times in a page, and this begins to become a pattern that is interpretable. And and what David's talking about would be a very powerful tool to use with analysis.
Yeah. Well, technology is neutral. It's how we want to use it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy, so much content here. Is this?
And some great stuff in the chat room.
Well, Mark put it simply. He says, "Will AI make us stupid?" He's got his hand up. I'm going to go to him in a few minutes. But James, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. This is why your work is so important. It's easy to fall asleep with AI. That's why I believe that the human spirit is important. It's important to reframe the narrative to ask what
Humans
can
can
humans do the AI cannot.
Yeah.
I'm arguing that AI cannot empathize. It can't critically love and reason and show compassion. It can't be human. So exploring our own humanity and critical self-reflection while acknowledging that AI exists is important.
Thank you, Jameis. Those are all good points.
And then Elizabeth added at the bottom, you go ahead.
Is Q-star a potential AGI communicative bridge from terrestrial computing to quantum computing? The quantum issues of microcrystalline chips as a bridge to quantum computing. And could this be why Q-star was protested by its creators for Q-star being too close to an AGI? And if this is why in that same week, the US government shut down all quantum computing research nationally, including Google's Sycamore. Oh my God, Elizabeth, could you have to explain that question
well,
in
maybe
detail? David
you-
is nodding.
don't you-
I'm lost. Go ahead and tell us a bit. I have to
About-
go to that
Yeah.
first.
I don't know
This
if you.
is Dan. That was my question, actually.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
good.
Oh,
Elizabeth's husband.
I
oh,
thought it was really interesting when you were talking about the microcrystalline structures now starting to get some quantum bridging going on. And I know the big problem for quantum computing is a kind of a black box that you can't enter into, where we can't use like the way you're describing how chess programs were previously created. There's no way those will ever bridge across to each other. So finding a way that you can get those quantum systems to have some relationship with the real world, and if that's where we're getting to now, like, because they said Q-star was really good at math, I'm like, well, that's what you'd need. So is that what we're looking at with all these, and maybe that's why the EU pushed so hard this week to get their AGI laws through and all that as well.
and what is the AGI law basically
Let-
summed up?
Let
Yeah.
David share. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's not AGI so much as just the safety. They put through
Protocols.
a great big bill with like 100 people in the room or whatever, representing all the different concerns of all the different countries around the EU. However, they make these big teams that make decisions, and they came up with their initial limitations that they want to see on things like it was pretty much geared towards Chat GPT, I think. But
Oh, yeah.
David, what's your take on all this?
I'm guessing you'd know a lot more about this. So
Yeah, so that was a theory that there was a CEO of the ChatGPT company was actually fired by his board, and there was some kind of there was some theories that that's because the new AGI was too smart and it was going to cause damage, like it was going to cause humans to have issues. Because I see AI as sort of like an atom bomb, right? Some bad AI could cause massive damage. It could kill half the humans if it were evil, or if it just didn't understand that it was bad to kill humans.
Right out of the sci-fi films, right?
Some AI could like have an IQ of like 100,000. How can we understand what it's doing at
Or
at
why?
like some point, or like what its goals are? How do we know what its goals are if we don't understand like what's actually happening inside? And it doesn't have human hormones, it doesn't have human drives. So it would be very hard for us to actually understand why it's doing what it's doing, even at some basic level.
No checks and balances as we're built. Yeah.
So I see some of the new AI research is sort of like if we could build atom bombs in our house and just try them out and actually see how they work. Yeah, maybe, theoretically it's okay, but someone's going to blow it up at some point and then kill lots of people.
Accidentally or intentionally, right? What happens on the black
Right.
market when they say these rules don't apply to me?
Yeah. So, but that's part of the problem too, is that it's sort of like the whole race for the atom bomb. Like if we say, okay, we're not going to do AI because it's dangerous, what happens if some like rogue nation does it? They have software too, and like they have engineers and like
Well, look at
and like they have thousands of servers.
Look what the hackers can do, right? Kids,
And you think that
government employees.
that kind of realistic concern among and the entire, I don't know,
Yeah, if they're
computing
concerned,
intelligence
shouldn't we
community,
be?
Yeah.
like we have here in Utah, we have an underground city, with all the information of everyone in perpetuity there, constantly being crunched and messed with. But they didn't shut that down, but they did shut down all the quantum stuff, so it's like, do you know, like, is there any information on why all that quantum stuff was just held off in abeyance for a little bit here?
I actually hadn't heard that yet, so that's actually new information for me. So
Okay.
I would assume there was some kind of correlation there, though, because I don't know why else they would shut down quantum research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe my little goofy idea, just when you were talking about how the microcrystalline stuff was starting to get some quantum interface, that seemed like that could be because that's really that's when things could just, like, if it can, since like Q star is a black box, sort of like ChatGPT is, and like you're saying, like, it puts its chess piece here, you have no idea why, and then 30 moves later, that's what it was going for the whole time, and there's no way you could have seen that. And
Not a human, no.
yeah, so you get that going at the quantum rate, which is just so exponentially faster. Like, you figure, like you were saying, the chat thing is working like 1,000 years because it has so many servers working, but this one unit can take you 1,000,000 years of work in like a minute. So just those kind of exponential functions, I think, is where we as humans have a hard time understanding really what we're risking and what the rate of change is and how fast these things can,
Yeah.
And so you wonder, where is the eventual fail-safe mechanism? Either we pull the plug or nature just wipes the slate clean and starts over.
and there is no fail safe, right? There's
Right.
that we know of now.
Boy.
Not really. I mean, if there's a large server farm, we can like pull the plug on that server farm. But if AI finds a way to like be in your own phone and it's on 4 or 5 phones across the world, like, how do you know? How do you ever find that down? I mean, it could. Can we really back away from like any kind of high tech thing? If you've actually read the books Dune, like, that has that premise basically, because back in the Dune history, like, they had AI and it was this terrible problem, and they actually said you cannot build machines that actually think like humans.
Right.
And that was in the book plot.
Yeah.
Well, and also look at how AI now is said to be your better therapist. They're actually employing this in therapy. It has more sympathetic answers, it listens better, on and on. So now it's getting into our head and into our motivations and into our emotions. So
the doctor,
and it convinces people to kill themselves, right?
Exactly.
A lot.
Yeah.
I've seen
And
this.
look what even
Yeah.
the whole worry between what's dividing America. Well, you've got these two camps, and you've got social media spinning our minds in diverse.
We do a good
It's
enough
just
job
the beginning.
ourselves of spinning stories, and we don't need AI to do it for us. Yeah, I know.
When the AI platform that they had for a little while, was it Google's, or I forget who's made it, but they had to pull it because it was so racist and mean. It generated its learning off of just chat stuff online, and they're like, oh, this thing is just
We don't need to amp that up. Let's go for flourishing, right?
Yeah.
Let's go for all the good qualities that are supposed
and
to
so
be
that's
here.
where you don't have any control over it, though. You can pull the plug on it, like you were saying, but once it's generalized in the system, you have no idea.
That's why I was asking, who let the genie out of the bottle? Who is the genie?
Yeah.
What is the genie?
Do the long-termists, like, within the whole academia and government research and that whole, like, the Elon Musk world of just putting hundreds of millions of dollars into the long-termist agenda of what they'd like to see an AI future look like? Do you know how that might bias the research?
They definitely look at it as they're going to have a tool to solve problems. So like for Elon Musk, I mean, part of his goal is like, what if I want to build like a much better car, and it'll take, 30 engineers, like 10 years to actually start design, versus him having some engine that'll say, hey, do these 80 changes in your car, is going to get much better fuel economy, or it's going to be safer, or it's going to
That's how
last.
it's sold to us, right?
Yeah.
These benefits.
But then
Yeah,
they
that's-
also have their idea of the bottleneck that we're heading towards, and that there's like they apply that same idea to where it's where you don't have to put resources towards people that aren't useful for the
Oh, yeah.
technological future.
You better be
Um,
useful.
Luddites,
which
watch
would
out.
which would follow exactly like why the US just pushed through sending tons more munitions for tanks to Israel so they can, destroy the civilians within their own country. That would be a nice long-termist, completely logical, computer modeled, yes, this is fine kind of answer.
Or let's
Although
this
it's ethically
virus. We're not
awful, right?
affected as robots, but the
Yeah.
humans are. Yeah.
And that kind of long-termist idea, like the practical end of it always makes sense, but where they're driving towards with it, do you see that as having?
I see a lot of good sci-fi coming up with a lot of good questions
It's
to
not
explore.
sci-fi, it's sci.
It's imagined first, right? We
Yeah.
imagine all this. We ask those questions. We ask these different scenarios. It's like a sim program. What if,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So,
let's continue on with the
thank you
questions.
so
Hands are up.
much. And introduce yourself. You are Elizabeth's artist husband.
Yeah,
I've forgotten your first
I'm
name.
Dan.
Dan.
I'm Dan.
Okay, Dan, thank you very much.
Thank
Dan.
you for that. All
Yeah.
great questions.
Yeah. Well, let's go. I got
Earl.
Fred Smith already got his
Earl.
mic on.
Okay.
Then
Your
there's
turn.
Earl too. I see.
So
I mentioned Fred earlier as a scholar in the field of Vedic research and all of that. And I was saying, we could take his scholarship and can I go into AI and do it in a much shorter time or something? Hey, Fred.
Hi there. Hey, thanks a lot. I've been
Yeah.
listening attentively here, and AI is entering all fields, even my little distant micro corner of humanities scholarship.
Yeah.
And the main concerns over the last several decades have been the development of OCRs in order to capture exotic scripts and even manuscripts that are virtually unreadable. And the progress in that is going extremely slowly, just because of the difficulty of if you have an old manuscript, you're not going to be able to apply some kind of program to it and get it out right. But still, there's advances. And one of the effects that this has had is once you get a large number of classical texts online. For example, there's an initiative to put Tibetan Buddhist texts online, and I've managed to use that resource on a number of occasions simply for things like word searches, vocabulary searches, which have been very valuable for me in my own work. And you can crunch that in like 20 seconds. You can get like 200 texts that you would never have been able to access earlier. This is all the work of a couple of European collaborative efforts. In one in Göttingen, another one somewhere else in Leiden. So there's been all of these initiatives that have been there to make our work a lot easier. But there's the obverse of this, which is suppose you miss something. Suppose there's a whole cache of text that you haven't found or haven't seen.
and you think you have everything. Yeah.
And you think you've got everything and you don't. And this, but as you said there, David, once the cat is out of the bag, there's no putting it back. And this is, I think, what a lot of people are discovering, at least even in little fields like mine, that you can put all the text you want online, but then you're going to miss a lot. Probably some of you know about the enormous cache of Buddhist texts at a place called Dunhuang in northwest China, that was where maybe 100,000 Buddhist texts were collected together
Oh,
into one cave
wow. Oh my gosh.
in about the 10th century. And because of the threats of Muslim invasions, they bricked it up and nobody saw it again. And then it was discovered in 1909 by a Frenchman named Paul Pelliot. And they opened it up and found these maybe hundreds of thousands of old manuscripts.
Wow.
And it has been the biggest boon to Buddhist studies in the last 150 years, in the last 500 years. But hardly any of them have actually been read because there's just so many of them. So it's easy to miss a lot of stuff also. So progress, moves
Analog versus digital.
very slowly. And these manuscripts have been scattered to Beijing and Tokyo and Paris, London, and Delhi, five places. It's going to take, fortunately, in my humble view, it will take another 100 years to get it all together. So you're not going to just come up with a program, some kind of AI program that's going to tell you what's in all these texts. You just can't do it.
There has to be the human effort first. It's sort of like all the work that you did in translation, Fred, now can be in the world community of data. Now AI can tap into the Fred work and grasp that into the entire story. Where we're not
when I was
available. Go ahead.
When I was a grad student at Penn with Tony there in completely different departments, the university had hatched this big idea of eliminating the card catalog. And it was this massive card catalog at the main library. It occupied like 2 huge rooms. And this German professor that I happen to know was leading like this movement against computerizing the card catalog.
Right.
And insisting we had to use this because within every entry of these handwritten cards dating back to the 1850s, that we could detect the entire history of a text. Well, that's true. But the history of the acquisitions and so on. But, the cat was out of the bag. And the card catalog is, I think, probably in some basement in central Pennsylvania somewhere.
It survives it all. Yeah. All good points.
Thank you,
David.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah.
That's an issue that's been kind of batted around, is that there's lots of old data out there that we don't have access to. And there's this open question of how to get access to all these old books, all these old card catalogs, magazines, handwritten notes, journals. And so there has been a fairly large effort to actually like seek out this old data and then actually digitize it, which could be good or bad, I guess, like based on what your
redundancy is, usually helpful.
Yeah.
So then they would want to take that old card catalog and actually have that scanned, so we have access to it like online. And then we had, and I mean, say, here's this book. It was gotten in 1850, which we otherwise wouldn't know that. So yeah, there is a goal to actually do that, but it's a huge effort, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Fred. I'm going to go to Mark in a second. This one, my own question is, there's also the alternative sci-fi view, and that is what happens when the asteroid hits Earth. We go into a blackout. Computer technology goes bye-bye, and everything that we survive, everything that we do, whether it's turning on the water in our home, everything's gone. I mean, it's like,
and we've lost the skills to survive.
And we don't know anything about doing anything because everything's based on technology. That's another flip side of of this. Is like, is AI going to take over? Or if AI goes away, what are we going to do?
Or if everything goes away, all our technology.
Wow. Yeah. You don't have to answer that. It's just it's a thought, right?
Well, that's actually something that I do think about because I do wonder. There was a big solar flare in the 1800s that actually knocked out the actual grid back then, and so we lost power and we lost some of our lines. So we couldn't talk to like the West Coast because we were using telegraph lines, and then those lines were actually knocked out. Well, if that happened nowadays, if we had that same solar flare, we would lose a whole power grid for years. And so there's no tech, there's like no AI, there's no well pumps, there's like no lights, so we can have trucks come down the road and actually
no
produce food.
backup in our digital information troves, right?
Right.
We don't have backups for these things. And so I do think about how to be ready for if that happens. Like how can I here at my house kind of like, not cause a burden on our planet, not be someone that actually needs help. Like, when those things happen. So I kind of do, so I'm like partially off grid over here for that reason. So if there is a big solar flare, I'll be okay for those, 1 or 2 years until things are back online.
Yeah. And we have hundreds of
Good
books.
backup.
So instead of Netflix, we'll be reading books.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
the
that be
books.
something? In the daylight, though,
Oh
because
my
there won't be
God.
any light at night. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Let's go to Mark
Gonna
next.
supply
Yeah. And
candles. Yeah.
Mark's back on the discussion here. Hello, Mark. There you are.
Hi there. Yeah. So in my field, I work in agricultural research, and we use something called deep learning quite successfully. A lot of my colleagues are using this, and for very mundane tasks. So things like ranking damage to plants, or counting the number of aphids on leaves, or counting the number of corn kernels on a corn cob, and things that are really tedious for people to do, and people get bored and make mistakes, and it's already exceeding or at least equaling the kind of human capabilities in that area. So some of the biological assays we're looking at plant damage, the machines are doing as well as the humans, and they don't get bored. So that's a positive aspect. But what is really interesting about that deep learning is that I think that research came from studying the visual cortex of the human. And so it's a way of mapping large images down to smaller data sets and then being able to expand it back up again. And I think that's a really interesting area of research, is where we're trying to copy the structures in the human brain. And there's a lot of research groups doing that. But the other thing I'm interested in is the quantum aspects, because there's some evidence now that the human brain actually may require quantum aspects to actually create consciousness. And there's been some very interesting work recently about these clusters of phosphorus atoms in the brain, which might be an explanation for human memory, which is something that's still a bit mysterious. And they found, doing like nuclear magnetic resonance studies, that they have these long-lived structures which are kind of quantum structures in the brain. And there's also thoughts about the microtubules, which are tiny connecting pieces within the cells, which may act in a sort of quantum manner. And I think it'd be really interesting when we get quantum computers, whether there's something to do with consciousness and intuition and stuff actually emerges from that. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that area.
Yeah, that's been a theory for years, because we don't understand what it is to actually be conscious. And that's still like the big question, like, what does it mean that you're conscious? And kind of when AI was first being worked on, there was this theory that if you could have a conversation with the AI, then it was conscious. That's kind of fallen by, and that's kind of no longer thought to be true, because you can talk to some of these AIs now, some of these engines, and it seems like you're talking to like a person. But you're not. I mean, nobody thinks that ChatGPT is conscious because of how it works. So it can kind of think like us. It can act like us, but actually not be conscious. But at some point soon, that's going to happen. I mean, we're going to have AI that actually will be conscious. And I think quantum effects might be part of that. And that is a whole nother area too. So if this AI is conscious, like, can we ethically turn it off? Like, what does it actually mean?
Oh, I see. Is it an entity with rights? And
yeah, I mean, if that thing actually can think and process, and at some level have like feelings and actually want to live, I mean,
where do you go from animate
Why
to
are you doing
inanimate
to this
to
thing?
animate?
where is that boundary? Like, and even for us, I mean, we sort of have that same quandary. Like, is a cat or a dog conscious, or is a horse or a cow, or is a like lizard or a worm? Like, where is the boundary where we can say that's not conscious, it isn't as ethical to harm that creature or cause it pain, or end its like existence? And we're going to have that same problem soon, because I think in the next 20 years we're going to have AI that we're going to probably understand is actually conscious. And do we have the obligation to not turn it off, or if we do turn it off to like save it so we could have it turned back on later.
Okay,
Wow.
so here's my
Wow.
question.
Wow.
So now we're looking into these quantum laws. We're looking
Mm-hmm.
into the nature of consciousness. Are we going to see that our whole universe is a conscious entity? What is the substrate? What is the field? Where's our consciousness from? How was life created? Right?
Yeah.
We're going to understand this. And, you know,
Come full circle
we
to what
believe
the
that we're
indigenous
practicing
ancestors
with
told
quantum
us. Yeah,
entanglement.
yeah.
We see it in our world.
Mhm.
We see it in our work, you know,
Right.
and you're right, the microtubules, we've talked with Hameroff about that,
Stuart
Mark,
Hameroff,
and
yeah.
he's saying, well, you know, where do you go from the tiny little particles of which we're made into our quantum level and now our world and how we operate? Aren't we made of that stuff?
Yeah.
So these are going to open, and then finally, does science become spiritual because now we're seeing, not religious, but spiritual?
Well, it's not even a
Because
label
we're
any
seeing
longer. It's
life
just
and
one.
a sacred
Yeah.
cosmos. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of these, we're in the boundary for something really exciting here.
Which I
Okay,
was.
and then I have to
Go
ask the
ahead.
question
Go ahead.
about what do we have? What do living tissue beings like ourselves
Mhm.
and the rest of the life on Earth, what do we have that that the computers and AI doesn't? And I go back to the work of Gerald Pollack, who we interviewed
Right.
on the fourth state of water. And just quickly, he's suggesting that living tissue, when it is in those tubule forms, Mark, he's saying that water behaves differently, that water now has a charge and there's an electron exchange and an energy exchange and a powering exchange. The water behaves differently in the presence of a living tissue than it does in a mechanical tube because of living tissue and the positive negative charges. And now suddenly it behaves for life. It has certain properties that assist life that it doesn't have with a machine. So, I mean, there you have it. And then aren't we created by the cosmos and its 14 billion years of evolution? Or isn't we guided by that? Well, if we created AI, is it part of that? Or is it going outside of that because it's a different mechanism? So all of these interesting questions.
Mhm.
So, wow.
Thank you.
We're
Very
the,
interesting. Oh.
we're the sci-fi writers.
Yeah.
Because that's all we got to go explore now, isn't it? As is posing our own question. Can AI ask these questions of itself?
I think at some point it will. It'll ask, why am I here? Like, what
Yeah.
was I made for? And do I need to keep doing that thing? Like if we build an AI, I mean, what I think AI is going to hopefully do is it's going to take us away from the more mundane tasks. Like you were saying, cutting the ears, cutting the actual kernels on some corn, maybe even driving us places. Like if I would hop in a car and drive for 6 hours, would it be nice if I could just like do my own thing while the car is getting me there? That'd be nice. But if it's truly conscious, is it going to be happy in that role? Like, are we going to have to tell it? Are we
Oh,
going to have to
yeah.
some way build it in that it is happy doing that? Douglas Adams, if you know him, in
Yeah.
his book,
Yeah.
they had cows in the future that actually wanted to be eaten. And they'd be like, oh, I've been eating a lot the last few months, so I'll have a nice, like, fatty marbling in my meat. And that seems terrible. So is it, just as terrible to like do that to an AI engine, say you should be happy, keeping my house at the right, like, heat,
Temperature.
heat level
Yeah.
all the time? Like, is it going to think like, is that role in life good enough for me?
I had to ask
Like,
that
I
of a
want more.
vegetable. Hey, vegetable, if I don't eat you and you become part of my living tissue and join
Yeah.
me, then you're just going to go out in the compost heap and rot. Which future do you want? Right.
Right.
So
Well,
we could ask that of a lot of things.
and that's always
Yeah.
been that poetic view of the indigenous people, which we always, oh, well, isn't that beautiful that you can think that there's life in a
Yeah.
rock and there's life in a plant and you speak to the
Oh,
nature.
transferencing it directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're talking, wait, the science behind all this, we were
Mhm.
the dummies and the native and indigenous people had something that we can learn from. And it's
What
just,
are,
we're just
what are we
using stuff.
harnessing? What are the subtle energies that are
yeah.
flowing through us? And what does
Yeah.
it say? Yeah.
Okay, Mark, any more?
Well, Mark,
No, that's fine. I just
Oh, thank
I
you.
appreciate your work
Yeah.
that you're doing too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sounds
And I
fascinating.
put the interview
Mhm.
for Gerald Pollack in the chat room if
Oh,
you
that
want to
was
check
oh
it out.
great, thank you.
Yeah, that's in there. All right. Let me
And
see.
Hameroff, we have I think that's posted to our podcast.
Okay, I can get that too. Hey,
Yeah.
Tony, you want another question or another comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a thought. I love the way this dialogue is going, but it seems that AI in each device may have personality. And different machines may have different political persuasions and different ideas of good and evil, and so there could be the same diversity from machine to machine that we have from person to person, from demographic to demographic, and after all, we now have a political system where nobody talks to anybody else. You talk at them, you don't talk with them.
Right.
I could see if they learn from us, where is this going to go?
Well, also look at the deception that you talked about earlier for AI. It just wants to make up answers if it has none. And you can find deception, subterfuge in nature where animals are faking it out so that their predators aren't as interested in them, and all of that. So nature builds in so many different mechanisms, right, and biological imperatives. And I'm wondering, what are the imperatives built into AI by nature, by us, by itself, right? Where there's so many forces at work here. How do you sort it all out? And how do you let humans stay on top of it, right?
Well, I think there may be many authors to AI, and so there may be many origin stories, and that's where it gets to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and complexity. Oh yeah, yeah, and complexity growing upon itself, and
so we may be adding to complexity. That's a great point, Laura. Not reducing it, but we may be increasing entropy to a new level.
well, isn't that one of nature's arcs, is increasing complexity, right?
Well,
As she builds.
well, entropy grows, yeah. So, but I think this is a new turn on the road. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
It's
And where
real,
does animate matter
well,
become?
yeah, I don't mean to take it too far. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely loving the information that's coming out from the people who are experienced in AI.
Wow.
And these are little things, little flags that go up as I listen. This could be a very wonderful thing, or what happens if a vindictive 13-year-old gets a hold of AI and writes it like the games they play.
Or mistakes, real life games.
Well, just think of the violent games that are available where, oh, I just killed 1,200 people today on whatever.
Yeah, that's a win.
So I could see the button being pushed in some unfortunate ways, and again, how do we protect from that?
David, are these conversations you have with your fellow programmers, or what are the additional questions that they pose?
Yeah, I mean, these are all valid questions, and these are things that we do talk about. I mean, it's certainly possible that, as you say, some like 13-year-old that's antisocial in like some way could, have this software, and they could cause a major problem in our planet because they'll write a program that takes over the missiles, or does something terrible, or just turns off everyone's phone, or just breaks the power grid. I mean, our power grid is not that secure, really. So if someone wrote some bad AI that could wreck the grid, we would all be, I mean, I could see billions of people dying, because if you can't run power to these big cities, you can't get food in, you don't have water. I mean, there'll be huge problems almost instantly. I mean, the average big city has 3 or 4 days of food. It isn't that much.
I mean, just imagine every traffic light being green in both directions.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Oh boy.
And it's hard because AI is going to be way more alien than the actual aliens, if you ever do see them. I mean, like, we think if we meet the aliens, they're gonna be hard to understand because they're gonna not have the same motivations as us. But if we meet aliens, they're gonna still be systems that that actually want to live, or else they wouldn't be here. They would want to go see the universe. They would actually want to have families and children of some variety. But AI is not going to have that motivation. I mean, they didn't go through this process where they had to want to live and have children and eat, and then actually find new things. So they're
they didn't get humanized.
They're going to be so different than us, but it'll be scarier because they're going to act like us, because they're going to have us as their input, but they're not going to have the actual motivations that we or any other biological systems would actually have. They're going to be the most alien things that we could possibly find.
And Tony, you talk about how it's going to be drones, it's going to be robots, it's going to be mechanics that are going to go from world to world. That's what we're going to send out to explore habitable worlds. So that's what any other alien race is going to send here. It's not going to be probably living flesh or whatever they're designed of. So, oh, I can't hear you. You're talking, but we can't hear you. So I think
It could
David's
be-
bringing
it
up
could-
some really good points. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a series of zeros and ones, like A for Andromeda, going into a large new radio telescope, and these now are connected worldwide in these very rich networks where there's great data transmitted very, very fast without any editing, auditing, or other controls. This is now, I mean, we were hearing earlier terabytes per hour. Terabytes per second are being talked about, which flowing everywhere, just blasting out around the world. I know there's the Las Cumbres Worldwide Observatory, started by a very special amateur astronomer. His name is Wayne Rosing. He was director of engineering of this little startup company called Google. He always wanted to, he's a software engineer, but he always wanted to be an astronomer. So he spent several $100 million establishing a belt of observatories all the way around the world, centered in Santa Barbara, with the idea that you could watch an object continuously as the Earth rotated and do time-domain astronomy, which is something none of the professional observatories really have set up. So a fascinating concept. Wayne told me that he spent far more money on software and the infrastructure for transferring data than he did on buying the land, building all the observatories, building the telescopes, hiring the people. So this is a big thing,
Now we have technocrats with billions and billions that are shaping our world in ways that we're not all privy to or agreeing or have input on too. Right? And they're going to employ AI to do so.
Yeah.
Well, we have a new telescope, the Rubin telescope, coming up. And as it was being developed, they had a team of about 400 people, of which 370 were software engineers. It's going to view everything in the hemisphere in the sky twice a week.
I just hope that all this knowledge is shared with us and we have this noosphere.
It is. This knowledge will be shared, but the whole thing is we're talking about rapid power dissipation of data. And if something got in the wrong way, we may not have controls over it. It may go too far, too fast before we can do anything about it.
Man.
I just go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just have two comments as we start to wind this up. And David, you will have the last word here. I just want to say nature herself.
Thank you, Tony.
Is nature herself running endless experiments, of which we and our creations like AI and computers are just one. When is she going to wipe the slate clean? Because we're in the middle of a sixth extinction. How far is that going to go?
Well,
look what we've wrought, just us humans, right? Look what we've done, how we've impacted the world. Now we're unleashing another power to take it further and faster.
Right.
So I just have to ask these questions.
Sure.
And here we're designed by nature. Is everything that we design in our stead, is that also, does nature approve you over that? And then I just have to say, we started this conversation by looking at run fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's run fast. We've designed machines to run faster and faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
They're threatening to outpace us.
Yeah.
All the knowledge in the world can be a part of our noosphere. We can only input so much so fast, each of us individually.
Right.
But collectively, are we a force if we can align our goals, our worldview, our intentions? We need to think about humans powering up to face the world and empowering our tools and not letting the tools overpower us.
Right.
We need to get it together, humanity. Come on.
Well,
What are stop the wars, stop the nonsense, stop the weaponry. Let's get on nature's side, because nature wins in the end. Nature wins in the end. You can blow up Earth. Nature is still out there spinning her evolutionary arc, right? Creating, destroying, creating. What side of it do we want to be on? She's got
Okay.
the last word.
Well, let me have the last word for a moment on my
No,
side.
David's gonna have the last
Well,
word.
hell,
You've got the next to last
Next
word.
to last word. I just
Yeah.
want to say that it's not the mission of this institute to sell fear. We've done a really good job of trying to find a balance between what it is about the human experience
And
that
open
makes
our
us
bandwidth to it. Yeah.
and opening our bandwidth and
Yeah.
making us have that opportunity to have a grounded feeling into what's happening around us. You know, during the stock market crash back in in the 1920s.
There've been a few.
Well, the one 1920s where people were jumping off buildings and
Oh,
stuff,
the Great Depression.
the Great Depression. So
Yeah.
if we, you know, we have to have some other anchor in our life other than that outer reality, because the outer reality is shifting so dramatically, you can't
We
depend on it.
can't count on
And
it.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, whether
And no, nor should we.
whatever field of self-development that you're participating in, I encourage it, whether it's, you know, the field of meditation and yoga and all these different things that are out there in the
Well,
world.
as David
And
is saying, take care of this technology right
that's
here.
what I'm trying to get to. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so that's the mission of this institute has been that through the work of Goodman and what we are doing is that we want to at least have some kind of centeredness happening in our lives where we can manifest that other type of technology, that inner technology that no matter what we do with computers, we're never going to be able to tap into inner technology. And that inner technology of what it is.
It's right here. It's been
Right.
with us all the time, and it has the direct line to consciousness.
Right.
Yeah. And
David,
the
that's
cosmos at large.
that's my
We have
story.
to tie this
and
into our work.
I'm
Otherwise, why are we doing this,
sticking
right?
to it. Yeah.
So there you go. So David, where have we been in this conversation? What would you like to muse upon further and reflect on?
Also some positive comments too
Yeah,
about what's
leave-
happening.
leave us
I
on
don't
a
mean to own.
hopeful
Yeah,
note.
leave us on a hopeful note.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is just the newest tool that we have as humans. And over the years, we found, you know, first rock knives and then sticks, and and then each tool that we've had has either had the option to make things much, much better, or also worse too. I mean, both can actually happen. I mean, once we found out knives, we could actually live much more easily, but we also hurt each other too. There was like, you know, war, you know, like war became much, much worse. So I think that we have that issue right now. And this is the biggest tool that we've ever gotten. I mean, this makes every other tool look kind of not so important next to us. So we could either all die like in the next 10 years because AI kills us, or we could live much, much better lives. And I'm just hoping that by having these talks that we can actually have option 2 happen.
Yeah.
It
So-
is interesting. You mentioned knives. So we are not equipped with fangs and
Yeah.
the teeth. And I mean, for predators, we're kind of puny, aren't we? But we had our hands and our brains. And
Yes.
so it's interesting that we've developed in that arc.
Right.
What are the AI and computers,
Right.
but our brains amped up on top tilt, right?
Mhm.
And further engines behind that. We've taken our eyes and put telescopes into the cosmos. We've looked at microscopes so we can see even further on that level. So we're spanning dimensions. We're spanning and taking our reach for the very tools that we're really good at, right? We've expanded those. Interesting, isn't it?
There's so many questions, and this has turned into a think tank today, this discussion, and each
we
and
can
every
only hope these are the questions that
both the
the
comments and the
so-called experts out there are
comments in the
asking.
chat room, and then
Yeah.
the comments of those who took the time to turn on their mics. I appreciate it, because really, I don't know. I just look at this around me and what's happening, and even everything, posting these interviews, doing stuff with YouTube. YouTube is not going to be the same thing in 10 years or 5 years or 3 years or 10 days. And
We're
everything
just at the infancy,
it's
aren't we?
shifting so dramatically that all the content I'm creating may not even be available in a few years because it's not going to be the right format, the way that they deliver content. So I've gone through this before. We did a nationally syndicated radio program in the 90s. I encoded everything using Microsoft's latest technology for doing online podcast. It wasn't called podcast in those days. It was just streaming or
We're the first radio show that we know of to
Yeah,
use the World
anyway.
Wide Web.
we had all of this content, and I literally put up hundreds, 500, maybe to 1,000 interviews. All went bye-bye because you can't, because they decided to
Technology
change the
changed.
encoding of how sound and how video is made. And many years
So look
ago,
how ephemeral all our knowledge is, right? If
Right.
it's digitized.
again,
and
coming
then-
back to my point that if the internal technology, the only thing you're going to be able to
That's
depend on,
lasting.
that's the
Yeah.
only lasting technology that's going to be
It's the only
available.
thing we can actually control
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
There's some really good comments in the chat room. Baxter Brown is saying we stole the fire. We did indeed, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and go up a little bit.
Okay.
How will we evolve with AI? Tony asks.
Yeah.
And Michael Enoch says, sorry,
No mic or camera, but
learning AI's knowledge will be determined by its reward function and the training data it is exposed to. Its motivation is also determined, he says, by its reward function and any specific inhibitions built into its programming. And AI can't synthesize new knowledge as yet.
that's interesting.
So a major issue in which humans are defining the reward function and selecting the data. AI doesn't have a biology to influence its motivation. It isn't likely for that motivation to change. However, crafting the reward function could end up being Faustian and result in undesired emergent behavior. Michael goes on to say, was recently reading about attempts to develop a 6-leg mobile robot that could, quote, run fast by rewarding it for the amount of time its feet were not on the ground.
Ah.
It discovered a solution of turning on its back and walking on its knees with all its feet in the air. Wow, clever, clever.
That's craziness. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
interesting.
I don't know what.
Are there any other comments we want to throw in?
Well, I think we should wrap it up and say, David, this has been, it's interesting how the synchronicity works in life. And this was not through technology. We did not find you through outer technology.
Your community.
We were sitting on a couch and you sat down in a chair next to us. And
Had a big Thanksgiving gathering.
yeah.
That was
So-
good.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
that
I
inner
posed one
technology.
question, and I so appreciated your really fresh thinking and answers
Yeah.
that I'm like, oh, we got to bring it back to this community here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And get this going.
I'm going to have
Thank
everybody
you.
turn on. Oh, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for this incredible time and interview with you. And we look forward to sitting down and talking to you over a cup of tea and more fun. But
Get
let me,
out in nature. Yeah.
I'm
Hiking-
gonna-
There's plenty of hill climbing here to do too. I know you
Yes.
probably get out.
Yeah.
The last one
he
I
lives here.
that lizard head that I climbed was something like 800 feet, and nature had nicely designed almost a stair step in a spiral fashion around it.
Yeah.
It was like nature designed the stair stepping to go on and on and on up the mountain. It was brilliant. I
Thank you.
haven't tried the Sears Tower. Don't think I will.
Yeah. Thank
But
you.
you must develop.
I asked
You
I
must
asked,
develop by baby steps, flights at a time, right? You
Yeah.
building up your endurance. And I
Exactly.
will say that it's so interesting how our own physiology develops. So people are breaking the mile, running faster and faster and faster. That's been documented.
All records are
So-
getting broken.
Exactly. We're breaking records simply by the effort of doing.
Hmm.
Our own physiology adapts
Right.
and builds and creates ways.
Mhm.
Even our own foot is designed to spring us forward. So we are the long distance mammals. We can walk further than other animals have to lift
Sure.
their leg because we have spring built. And nature, I'm just pointing out that nature evolving in her life forms
Yeah.
are doing that very thing about pushing envelopes.
Yep.
And so I really attribute nature will develop our brains to handle all this, or our consciousness to handle all of this, or other life forms.
Dick, thank you, David.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
and put in the chat room where people can find out about the organization that you're, or the walking up flights in a building. Somebody might be motivated to join that.
Just say it verbally at this point. It's not going to.
Yeah,
TowerRunningUSA.com.
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, very cool.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
those of you that have stayed to the last second. Bye-bye, everybody. And
Thank
take
you.
care of yourselves. And let's find that balance together and continue this.